My name is Naya, and I am 35 years old. My husband thought he was a genius for moving his mistress into our backyard guest house while I was away on a business trip. But he forgot one tiny, expensive detail. He doesn't own a single blade of grass on this 3-acre property. Before I tell you how I turned his little love nest into a legal crime scene, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And y'all, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you most, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button right now. I had just touched down at Hartsfield-Jackson after a grueling 4-day auditing conference in Chicago. Now, most people hear the word auditor and they want to fall asleep standing up. That's fine by me. I've spent my whole life being the boring one. While my sisters were out winning pageants and my husband, Marcus, was busy trying to be the next big mogul in Atlanta, I was the one sitting in the corner with my spreadsheets and my glasses. I'm a senior actuary. My entire job is calculating risk and knowing exactly what things are worth. I pulled my $450 To-Me carry-on out of the back of my Uber and stopped dead in my tracks. There was a massive white moving truck parked right in the middle of my circular driveway in Buckhead. And I'm not talking about a U-Haul. This was one of those premium white glove moving services that charges you $5,000 just to show up and breathe your air. The Georgia heat was already hitting 85 degrees at 10 in the morning, and I could feel my silk press starting to fail me, but I didn't move. I watched as 2 men in matching uniforms hauled a velvet sofa, the kind that costs at least $7,800, out of the truck and toward the guest house. Now, what in the world is going on? I muttered to myself. I walked toward the guest house, my sensible Ann Taylor loafers clicking against the pavement. That's when I saw him. Marcus was standing on the porch, wearing a brand new linen suit that probably cost him $2,500 on a credit card he definitely hasn't paid off yet. He was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Next to him was a woman who looked like she'd been assembled in a factory specifically designed to irritate me. She was younger, maybe 25, and she was draped in what I call logomania. She had on the Gucci headband, the Balenciaga Triple S sneakers that retail for $950, and a Louis Vuitton Never Full bag that looked a little too orange to be authentic. "Nia, you're back early," Marcus said. He didn't even move to help me with my bag. He just stood there, looking down at me like I was a distant cousin he hadn't seen since the last Spelman homecoming. "I finished my report early, Marcus. Why is there a moving truck at the guest house?" I kept my voice flat. Gray rock, no emotion. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. "Oh, baby, don't even worry your little head about it," he said, and the condescension in his voice was so thick you could have spread it on a biscuit. "This is Chloe. She's my new lead brand consultant for the tech startup. Since we're in the middle of a heavy sprint phase, I figured it made the most sense for her to stay on site, for the synergy." Chloe stepped forward, her acrylic nails clicking as she adjusted her headband. The smell of her perfume hit me. It was that overly sweet Versace Eros Parfum that stays in a room for 3 days after you leave. "Hi, Naya," she said, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness that would give you a cavity. "Marcus told me you were the quiet type. Don't worry, I won't be in your way. I'll mostly be focused on the vision for the brand. I'm sure you understand how important it is for Marcus to finally have a space where his creativity isn't stifled." She looked at my navy blue suit and my lack of designer labels, and I saw the smirk. She thought she was the prize. She thought I was just the boring wife who kept the lights on while the real stars played. "Stifled?" I asked, tilting my head. Marcus, you told me the guest house was going to be your man cave last year when we spent $125,000 renovating it. Marcus laughed, a loud, forced sound. Plans change, Nia. That's the problem with you. You're so stuck in the numbers, you don't know how to pivot. Chloe is an investment. Her presence here is going to help me close that $8 million Series A round I told you about. I knew for a fact that the only thing Marcus was closing was a tab at the St. Regis bar, but I didn't say a word. I looked past them into the guest house. I could see her unpacking. She had already hung up a neon sign that said "Hustle Harder" over the fireplace. She was treating my property like her personal Airbnb. "Marcus," I said, stepping closer, "we didn't discuss this." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "We don't need to discuss everything, Naya. I'm the man of this house. I made an executive decision. Now why don't you go inside, fix yourself some of that lemon water you like, and let us get back to work. Chloe needs the keys to the side gate, by the way. Make sure you leave them on the counter." The audacity was actually impressive. He really thought he was the king of Buckhead. He was standing there in his leased Mercedes G-Wagon lifestyle, looking at me like I was the help. "I see," I said. I looked at Chloe. She was busy taking a selfie in front of the moving truck, probably for her business owner Instagram stories. "And how long do you plan on staying, Chloe?" "As long as it takes to get Marcus to the top," she chirped, not even looking up from her phone. Marcus patted my shoulder, the kind of patronizing pat you give a dog. "Go on, Naya. You look tired. Auditing must be so draining. Let the professionals handle the big moves." I turned around without another word. I walked back to the main house, my heart beating steady. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. My mind was doing what it does best. It was calculating. See, Marcus thinks he's the owner of this estate because his name is on the mailbox. He thinks because he handles the business and I handle the home that he's the one holding the cards. He's been telling his family, his mother, Queen Beatrice especially, that I'm just a glorified secretary who got lucky marrying a man with his vision. But here is the thing about being an actuary. You always look at the foundation before you look at the house. I went into my home office, a room Marcus rarely enters because it lacks vibes. I opened my biometric safe, a $2,200 piece of hardware hidden behind a boring print of a botanical garden. I pulled out a thick manila folder. Inside was the original deed to the land. This property wasn't just a house, it was a family legacy. My grandfather had bought this acreage back when Buckhead was just trees and dirt. He left it to me in a private trust that Marcus has never seen the paperwork for. When we got married, I let Marcus pay for the structure of the house using a loan he took out. I let him think he was the provider. But in the state of Georgia, and specifically according to the ironclad trust my grandfather's lawyers drafted, the land and any permanent improvements belong to the trust owner if the taxes aren't paid by the primary resident. And y'all won't believe what I found when I logged into the tax commissioner's portal 10 minutes later. Marcus hadn't paid the property taxes in 18 months. He'd been too busy buying $2,000 suits and $300 dinners to bother with the 5-figure tax bill. He thought he was the king of the castle, but he forgot one small thing. I hadn't just been auditing for my clients, I'd been auditing him. And as of 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, I had personally paid those back taxes in full, which triggered a very specific clause in our prenuptial agreement regarding abandonment of financial responsibility. I looked out the window and saw Chloe carrying a tray of appetizers out to the pool area. She was wearing one of my silk robes. The math wasn't mathing for them, but for me, the numbers were finally starting to add up. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd moved his mistress into my backyard and I'd just sit in the main house and bake pies like a good little scapegoat. But he forgot the most important rule of real estate. The house is only as strong as the ground it's built on. And I still had the keys to the safe. Now, y'all won't believe the nerve of this man. It was barely Sunday morning, the sun was just starting to peek over the oak trees in Buckhead, and I was woken up by the sound of a bass drop so loud it made my $200 silk pillowcase vibrate. I looked out my bedroom window and saw Marcus in the backyard, wearing a pair of Versace shades that cost $750 and a silk shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. He was directing a team of caterers who were setting up white linen tables around the pool. This wasn't just a business meeting. Marcus was throwing a full-blown influencer brunch on my dime. I checked my banking app and nearly dropped my phone. There it was, a pending charge for $4,500 from a premium catering company. He hadn't used his own business account. He'd swiped the emergency credit card I keep in the kitchen drawer for household repairs. I guess a mistress in the guest house counts as a household repair now, I whispered to myself. I didn't storm downstairs. I didn't scream. I just did my morning skincare routine using my $300 La Mer cream and put on a plain charcoal gray yoga set. I wanted to look as invisible as possible. I wanted to be the gray rock he always complained about. When I walked out onto the patio, the smell of truffle oil and expensive champagne was thick enough to choke a horse. There were about 20 people there, all of them holding gold-rimmed Baccarat crystal flutes that I know for a fact retail for $500 a pair. Marcus was standing at the head of the table, holding a bottle of Ace of Spades champagne, a $1,200 bottle, and pouring it like it was tap water. Chloe was right there at his side, wearing a white crochet cover-up that left nothing to the imagination and a pair of Chanel slides that cost $1,100. She looked like she'd spent the morning at a high-end salon, her hair laid so flat it looked like it was painted on. "Oh, look who decided to join the living," Marcus shouted when he saw me. He didn't even use my name. He just pointed at me like I was a stray cat that had wandered into the party. "Naya, baby, we're running low on the passion fruit mimosas. Since you're already dressed for the gym, why don't you run into the kitchen and whip up another batch for the guests? Chloe needs her vitamin C." A couple of his influencer friends, guys in fake gold chains and girls with $5,000 BBLs, giggled. They looked at my plain outfit and my lack of makeup and dismissed me instantly. To them, I was just the boring wife who didn't understand the lifestyle. "The mimosas are on the counter, Marcus," I said, my voice as calm as a Sunday morning at Big Mama's house. "But if you need more, the caterers you hired for $4,500 should probably be the ones handling that, don't you think?" Marcus's face twitched for a split second. He didn't like me mentioning the price. He liked to pretend the money just fell from the sky because of his brilliance. "Don't be difficult, Naya. It's bad for the energy," he snapped. He turned back to his friends, flashing a smile that was as fake as Chloe's $3,000 veneers. Anyway, as I was saying, once the Series A funding hits, we're going to turn this entire backlot into a private wellness spa. Chloe is already scouting the architects. I watched Chloe lean over and whisper something in his ear, her hand resting on his arm right over the Patek Philippe watch I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. That watch cost me $45,000. I felt a tiny spark of heat in my chest, but I pushed it down. "Excuse me," Chloe said, turning her attention to me. "Naya, while you're being productive, I noticed some old, dusty blankets in the guest house closet. They had this weird old person smell, so I had the movers put them out by the curb with the rest of the trash. I'm sure you don't mind. I've already ordered some new Hermes Avalon throws to replace them. They're only $1,600 a piece. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It stopped. Those old blankets weren't just blankets. They were hand-stitched quilts my big mama had made for me before she passed. She'd spent 300 hours on each one, using scraps of fabric from my Sunday school dresses and my graduation gown. They were the only things I had left of her. I looked toward the curb. There they were. 3 generations of my family's history, stuffed into a black plastic trash bag next to a pile of empty champagne boxes. "You threw them out?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. It went cold. Ice cold. "It's called curating, honey," Chloe said, taking a sip of her champagne. "You should try it. Maybe start with your wardrobe." Marcus laughed, reaching over to squeeze Chloe's waist. "She's right, Nia. We're elevating the brand now. Out with the old, in with the new. That's the mogul mindset." I didn't argue. I didn't reach for her throat, even though every fiber of my being wanted to. Instead, I pulled out my iPhone 15 Pro Max, the $1,200 model, and I started recording. I didn't record them. I recorded the trash bags. I recorded the caterers using my kitchen. I recorded Marcus bragging about how he was going to develop the land. "Now, y'all won't believe what I did next," I whispered into the phone's microphone, pretending I was just taking a voice note. I walked back into the house, past the flying monkeys who were busy taking selfies by my infinity pool. I went straight to my office and locked the door. My hands were finally shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a woman who had just seen the final piece of the puzzle fall into place. I sat down at my desk, a custom walnut piece that cost $8,500, and opened my laptop. I didn't look at the party. I looked at the security footage from the gate. Marcus was so busy being a baller that he didn't notice the $2,000 smart lock system I'd installed last month. I pulled up the logs. He had given Chloe her own entry code. He had authorized the movers to remove household items from the property. In the eyes of the law, he was admitting to disposing of my personal property while being a non-paying resident on land he didn't own. I took a deep breath and opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it The Debt. Underneath, I started a spreadsheet. Catering, $4,500. Stolen quilts. Heirloom value, incalculable. Unauthorized guest fee, $500 per night. I looked back out the window. Marcus was standing on a chair now, giving a toast to his empire. He looked so big, so powerful. He really thought he had successfully buried my past and my voice under a mountain of Chloe's curated luxury. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd broken the gray rock by throwing away the only things I loved. But he forgot one small thing. When you throw away the past, you lose the only thing that was keeping me from destroying your future. I looked at the photo I'd just taken of the trash bags on the curb. Then I looked at the deed in my hand. Marcus thought he was burying my past when he threw those quilts away. He didn't realize he was actually digging his own grave. And y'all, I was more than happy to provide the shovel. Now y'all won't believe the audacity of this man. After letting his mistress throw away my big mama's hand-stitched quilts like they were yesterday's newspaper, Marcus had the nerve to act like he wanted a romantic dinner just for the two of us. I knew better. In Marcus' world, a candlelit dinner isn't about love. It's a boardroom meeting where he's the CEO and I'm the one being downsized. He'd set the table with the gold-rimmed Versace plates, the ones that cost $500 a pop, and opened a bottle of Chateau Margaux that I know for a fact he paid $550 for at the boutique wine shop down the street. He was wearing a black Tom Ford turtleneck that retailed for $950, looking like he was about to audition for a movie about a billionaire. "Naya, baby, sit down," he said, pulling out my chair with a flourish that felt as fake as a $3 bill. "We need to have a serious talk about our future, about the legacy we're building." I sat down, keeping my face as blank as a fresh sheet of printer paper. I didn't mention that I'd spent the last 3 hours in my office looking at his credit card statements. I didn't mention that I knew he was $200,000 in the red. I just played the part of the boring actuary wife. "Is something wrong, Marcus?" I asked, my voice as calm as the water in my $100 Baccarat crystal glass. "Wrong? No, baby. Everything is moving at the speed of light," he said, leaning forward. His eyes were wide, that frantic look he gets when he's trying to sell a lie. "The tech startup is about to explode. We're talking global scale, but we've hit a small liquidity snag, just a temporary bottleneck in the cash flow before the $8 million Series A funding hits next month." He paused, waiting for me to ask how I could help. I just took a slow sip of my wine and waited. Silence is a gray rock's best friend, y'all. It makes narcissists itch.
"The thing is," he continued, clearing his throat, "I need you to liquidize your 401k. It's just sitting there, Nia, only earning, what, 7%, 10%? If you put that $250,000 into my firm today, I can turn it into $2 million by Christmas. It's a no-brainer." I almost choked on my wine. $250,000. That was my safety net. That was the money I'd been tucking away since my first job out of my HBCU, back when I was eating ramen and driving a beat-up Toyota. "Marcus, that's my retirement," I said, keeping my voice low. "I worked 15 years for that." He let out a sharp, patronizing laugh and set his fork down with a loud clink. "And that's the problem with you, Nia. You have a poverty mindset. You're so scared of losing a little bit of change that you can't see the gold mine right in front of you. You're financially illiterate when it comes to high-level wealth. You're an actuary, not a mogul. You deal with the past. I deal with the future." He was gaslighting me so hard, I'm surprised the room didn't catch fire. He was trying to make me feel small for being responsible. He wanted me to believe that my hard-earned $250,000 was just change compared to his imaginary millions. "I don't know, Marcus," I whispered, looking down at my plate. "It feels risky." "Risk? Life is a risk," he shouted, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "But you wouldn't understand that. You're content being the dusty librarian of the family while I'm out here building a kingdom for us. Chloe gets it. She's already offered to sell her car to help with the sprint phase. She has more vision in her pinky finger than you have in your whole body." It took everything in me not to laugh. Chloe's car was a leased BMW 3 Series with a $300 monthly payment she was already 60 days behind on. I'd seen the repo notice in the guest house mail pile. "She's very dedicated," I said, playing the boring scapegoat role to perfection. Marcus softened his tone, reaching across the table to grab my hand. His skin felt cold. "Look, I know I've been hard on you. I know the situation with the guest house is a lot, but I'm doing this for us. To show my appreciation, I got you a little something. Consider it a down payment on our new life." He pulled a small red box out of his pocket and slid it across the table. I opened it to find a Cartier love bracelet, the gold one that usually retails for $7,350. Marcus, it's beautiful, I said. But as I lifted it out of the box, my fingers told me a different story. I've owned real Cartier. I know the weight of 18-karat gold. This thing felt like it was made of soda cans and gold spray paint. It was a faux tier from a flea market. Probably cost him $45. Put it on, he urged, his eyes tracking my hands. It looks like money, doesn't it? It definitely looks like something, I replied. I snapped the fake gold onto my wrist. The math, it just feels right now. Exactly! Marcus beamed, thinking he'd finally broken me. Now, I'll have the paperwork for the 401k transfer on the counter tomorrow morning. Just sign it and we can put this broke narrative behind us. I'm gonna go check in with Chloe on the marketing deck. Don't stay up too late, okay? You look tired. He stood up, adjusted his Tom Ford turtleneck, and walked out the back door toward the guest house without even offering to help clear the table. He left me sitting there with a $550 bottle of wine and a $45 fake bracelet. I waited until I heard the guest house door click shut. Then I stood up and walked over to my kitchen island. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved for a long time. Auntie Val? I said when the line picked up. It's Nia. I think it's time we look at those forensic audits we discussed. He just tried to sell me a fake bracelet to buy my retirement fund. Bless his heart, Auntie Val's raspy voice came through the speaker. He really thinks you're the fool, doesn't he? He does, I said, looking at the fake gold glittering on my wrist. He thinks I'm the dusty librarian. He doesn't realize I've already read every book in his library, and most of them are works of fiction. I hung up and walked to the trash can. I didn't throw the bracelet away. Not yet. I needed it for the evidence locker. I walked to the guest house window and watched Marcus and Chloe through the glass. They were clinking glasses, probably celebrating how they'd finally handled the boring wife. They thought they were the predators, and I was the prey. They thought my silence was weakness, and my plainness was poverty. But they forgot that I'm the one who counts the numbers, and I had already counted them out. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully gaslit me into handed over my life savings with a flea market trinket. But he forgot one small thing. I didn't get to be a senior actuary by believing in fairy tales. He thought he was giving me a gift. He didn't realize he was just giving me the last piece of proof I needed to show the world exactly who he was. Now, y'all won't believe what happened when I checked the mail the next morning, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Marcus thought he'd bought my loyalty for $45. He didn't realize he'd just signed a confession. Now, y'all won't believe what I saw sitting on the marble kitchen island when I walked down for my coffee the next morning. It wasn't just a good morning note. It was a stack of legal documents thick enough to be a phone book, and right on top was a Mont Blanc Mistress pen, the kind that retails for $925, placed there like it was some kind of holy relic. Marcus was already up, sitting at the breakfast nook wearing a navy blue silk robe that cost him $1,200. He was scrolling through his phone, probably checking the likes on the photos he'd posted from his fake influencer brunch the day before. The smell of high-end coffee from our $1,100 Nespresso Virtuo machine filled the room, but the atmosphere felt like a courtroom right before the judge reads a life sentence. "Morning, baby," Marcus said, not even looking up. I had my lawyers, well, the firm's lawyers, draw up those refinancing agreements we talked about. Since you're so worried about the risk of the 401k, I figured we'd consolidate the estate's debt first. It'll lower our monthly overhead by at least $3,500. I walked over to the Jen Air range, a $12,000 appliance he'd insisted on but never used to cook anything more complex than toast, and poured myself a cup of tea. I didn't want the caffeine. I needed my hands to be steady.
Refinancing? I asked, keeping my voice as flat and uninterested as a Monday morning at the office. I thought we were just talking about the retirement fund. It's all part of the same strategy, Nia, he said, finally looking at me. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, probably because he was busy calculating how much of my money he could spend before I noticed. If we refinance the house under the Marcus Montgomery Global Holdings umbrella, we get a massive tax break. It's a mogul move. You wouldn't get it, but trust me, it's what every big player in Atlanta is doing right now. I walked over to the island and pulled the stack of papers toward me. I knew exactly what he was doing. This is the oldest trick in the narcissist playbook. You sandwich the real crime between 40 pages of boring, technical jargon and hope the boring wife just flips to the back to sign so she can go back to her spreadsheets.
Y'all, he really thought I wouldn't read the fine print, I whispered to myself, tucked behind the steam of my tea. Me, an actuary who spends 8 hours a day finding the oops in $10 million insurance contracts. I flipped through the first 10 pages. It was standard fluff, disclosures, interest rate projections, blah, blah, blah. But then, tucked right between the escrow disclosure and the Homeowners Association acknowledgement, I saw it. It wasn't a refinancing agreement. It was a quit-claim deed. In plain, cold English, it stated that I, Nia, was releasing and forever quitting my interest in the property and the land, transferring it entirely to Marcus Montgomery Global Holdings for the sum of $10. $10. He was trying to steal my $3 million estate and the $5 million worth of land it sat on for the price of a fast food combo meal. This page looks different, Marcus, I said, pointing to the deed. I didn't point out what it was, I just played the part of the confused, financially illiterate wife he wanted me to be. What does quit claim mean? It sounds so final. Marcus let out a sigh, the kind of heavy, I'm dealing with a child sigh that used to make me feel small. It's just legalese for quitting the old high interest rate, Nia. Don't get hung up on the vocabulary. It's a technicality. The bank requires it to move the asset into the business name. Chloe already had her lawyers look at it, and they said it's standard procedure for high net worth couples. Mentioning Chloe's lawyers was a nice touch. I knew her lawyers were probably just a Google search and a glass of cheap wine, but I didn't say that. I don't know, I said, biting my lip. Big Mama always said never to sign anything on a Monday because the devil is most active at the start of the week. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, not enough to break it, but enough to make the baccarat flutes rattle. Nia, we don't have time for Big Mama superstitions. The notary is going to be here in 20 minutes. This is about our future. This is about me being able to provide the lifestyle you deserve. Do you want to be a dusty librarian forever, or do you want to be the wife of a man who owns the skyline? I looked at him, really looked at him. He looked desperate. He looked like a man who was drowning and trying to use my head as a stepping stone to stay afloat. Okay, Marcus, I said softly, if you're sure it's standard. I'm positive, he said, his voice instantly turning back to that oily, smooth operator tone. He slid the Mont Blanc pen toward me. Sign at the bottom of page 15, 22, and the final signature on page 40. Don't worry about the notary. He's a friend of mine. He'll just stamp it later to save us time. Now, y'all, this was the technical trap. In the state of Georgia, a deed signed without a notary present is a nightmare to prove in court. But I had a different plan. I had already called my bank's fraud department 3 days ago. I had set up a duress signal on my account. I picked up the $925 pen. It felt heavy, like the weight of the 7 years Marcus was likely going to spend in a federal facility. I flipped to the quit claim deed. I didn't sign my name, Nia Montgomery. Instead, I signed with my maiden name, Nia Beatrice Vance. But I looped the B in a very specific, jagged way that I had registered with my bank as my identity theft trigger. The moment that pen hit the paper and I made that specific mark, a silent alert was sent to the forensic audit team at my private wealth management firm. They knew that if they saw that signature on any document involving the Buckhead property, it meant I was being forced or defrauded. "There," I said, sliding the papers back to him. "It's done." Marcus snatched the papers up like they were made of gold. He didn't even look at the signature. He was too busy imagining the $300,000 hard money loan he was going to take out against my house the second he filed this at the county clerk's office. "Good girl," he said, and I felt a shiver of disgust crawl up my spine. "Now I've got to run. Chloe and I have a meeting with some angel investors at a lounge in Midtown. Don't wait up. There's some leftover Sunday dinner in the fridge if you're hungry." He didn't even kiss me. He just grabbed his $2,000 briefcase and practically ran out the door. I watched his G-Wagon pull out of the driveway, the engine roaring with the sound of a man who thought he'd just pulled off the heist of the century. I waited until the gate clicked shut. Then I picked up my phone. I had a notification from my bank. "Alert. Potential fraudulent document signature detected. Property, 1240 Oak Ridge Way. Action, monitoring initiated." Now, y'all won't believe what he said when I walked into that office the next day, I whispered, a slow smile finally spreading across my face. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully tricked the boring wife into giving away her inheritance with a $900 pen and a mountain of lies. But he forgot one small thing. I'm an actuary. I don't just read the fine print. I'm the one who writes the rules on what happens when you try to break it. He thought he had the keys to the kingdom, but he didn't realize I'd already changed the locks on the safe, and the bank was already watching every move he made. Now, y'all, if there is one thing a narcissist loves more than a mirror, it's a flying monkey. And Marcus's mother, Queen Beatrice, was the head of the circus. I was still sitting in my office, watching the silent alert from my bank glow on my phone after I'd signed that fraudulent deed with my trap signature, when I heard a car horn blaring in the driveway. It wasn't the deep rumble of Marcus's G-Wagon. It was the high-pitched, self-important honk of a white Cadillac Escalade, the kind that costs $95,000 but has a service engine soon light that's been on since the first payment. I looked out the window and sighed. Queen Beatrice had arrived. She stepped out of the car like she was the First Lady of Atlanta, draped in a $3,500 mink coat despite the fact that it was nearly 80 degrees outside. She has this way of walking, shoulders back, chin up, looking at the world like it owes her a back payment on a debt she never even issued. She's the kind of woman who spends $400 a week at the salon to keep her silver hair in a church mother bob that doesn't move even in a hurricane. "Nia, I know you're in there, girl. Come help your mother-in-law with these bags," she shouted toward the house. I didn't rush. I'm a gray rock, remember. I counted to 10, smoothed out my $200 Lululemon leggings, and walked to the front door. "Hello, Beatrice," I said, keeping my voice as neutral as a beige wall. "I didn't know you were coming into the city today." Well, a mother shouldn't need an appointment to see her only son, now should she? She said, pushing past me into the foyer. She stopped and sniffed the air, her nose wrinkling as if she'd smelled a $3 steak. It's a little quiet in here, Naya. A house this big should have more life, more energy. But I suppose you're just busy with those little numbers of yours.
She dropped her handbag, a Louis Vuitton Capucines that retailed for $7,000 but had a scuff on the bottom that told me she'd probably bought it secondhand, onto my $2,800 entry table.
Marcus called me, she said, her eyes narrowing. He said you're being difficult about the new business ventures. He said you're letting your fears hold back his destiny. Now, I didn't raise my son to be a king just so he could be tethered to the ground by a woman who's scared to fly.
The math has to make sense, Beatrice, I said, leaning against the doorframe. That's all.
The math? She scoffed. Naya, honey, let me tell you something. I've seen women like you before. You think you're being smart with your budgets and your savings, but you're actually being an enabler of mediocrity. A good Black woman supports her man's vision, even when she can't see the full picture yet. That's what we do. We build the throne so they can sit on it. She looked at me with a fake, pitying smile. Anyway, I'm famished. Marcus told me to meet him and Chloe at Chop's Lobster Bar in Buckhead for dinner. He said you'd be happy to drive me and, of course, take care of the tab. Consider it a tithe into your husband's future. The $1,200 dinner.
Now, y'all won't believe the scene at the steakhouse. Chops is the kind of place where the valet line looks like a $5 million car show, and the air smells like $200 cologne and old money.
Marcus and Chloe were already seated at a circular booth in the back, the kind that's reserved for big players. Marcus was wearing a new Patek Philippe watch, the Nautilus model that costs $125,000. I knew it was a fake the second the light hit the bezel, but he was flashing it around like he'd just signed a deal with Google. Chloe was wearing a dress that was basically 3 pieces of dental floss and a dream, paired with a Chanel boy bag that cost $6,100. "Mama, you made it!" Marcus stood up and kissed Beatrice on both cheeks. He barely glanced at me. "Nia, thanks for bringing her. Sit down, sit down. We've already started with the appetizers." The table was covered in financial porn. There was a 3-tiered chilled seafood tower that cost $250, a bottle of Krug Grand Cuvée champagne that retailed for $300, and 2 plates of Wagyu beef carpaccio at $65 an ounce. Naya was just telling me how she's worried about the math, Marcus, Beatrice said, tucking her silk napkin into her mink coat. I told her she needs to stop being a scapegoat for her own insecurities and start being a partner. Exactly, Chloe chimed in, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. In the mogul world, we don't look at the cost. We look at the ROI, the return on investment. Right now, Nia, you're looking like a net loss. They all laughed. I just sat there, the gray rock in the middle of a shark tank. I ordered a side salad and a glass of sparkling water. I didn't want a single thing they were eating to be in my system. "So, Marcus," I said, keeping my tone mild, "Beatrice mentioned this investment you're working on. Is this the same one from the papers I signed this morning?" Marcus's eyes flickered toward his mother, a quick, silent signal that didn't escape me. "It's all connected, baby. Once the deed is filed, we use the equity to buy into the luxury condo development in Midtown. My mother is actually the lead consultant on the interior design. We're paying her a consultant fee of $50,000 once the first round of funding clears." My heart did a slow, heavy thud. $50,000. Now, y'all, Queen Beatrice hasn't designed anything more complex than a Sunday dinner menu in her life. This wasn't a consultant fee, this was a kickback. This was Marcus using my home equity to pay off his mother so she'd keep acting as his flying monkey and pressure me into staying quiet. $50,000? I asked. That's a lot of money for interior design, Beatrice. What's your vision for the condos? Beatrice didn't even blink. Luxury, Nia. Real luxury. Not the sensible things you like. We're talking gold leaf, velvet, and marble. Things that show people we've arrived. The bill arrived at the end of the night. Marcus didn't even reach for it. He just tilted his head toward me. Nia's got it, right, baby? Since you're the one who handles the household accounts? I took the leather folder. The total was $1,248.62. I pulled out my Sapphire Reserve card and swiped it without a word. Thanks for dinner, Nia, Chloe said, standing up and adjusting her fake Chanel bag. It's nice to know you're good for something. As we walked out to the valet, I watched Beatrice and Marcus whispering by the Escalade. Chloe was busy taking a video of her feet against the marble floor for her Instagram story. Y'all really think you're playing me, I whispered under my breath as I handed the valet a $20 bill. I got into my car and pulled out my phone. I didn't call the bank this time. I opened a private app that was connected to the hidden cameras I'd installed in the guest house and the main foyer yesterday. I scrolled back to the footage from an hour before we left for dinner. There was Beatrice, sitting at my kitchen island, opening my mail. She found a letter from my private wealth manager. She didn't put it back. She took a photo of the balance, the account Marcus doesn't know exists, and sent it to him. The text on the screen of her phone, which the high-def camera caught perfectly, said she's worth over $10 million in liquid assets alone. Don't let her sign a divorce until we get the deed filed. We need to drain her slow. Beatrice wasn't just a flying monkey. She was the architect. She wasn't just enabling Marcus. She was coaching him on how to strip mine my life. Now, y'all won't believe what I found in Beatrice's car when I accidentally left my phone in the back seat, I said to the empty car. They thought I was the boring wife they could drain. They thought Beatrice was the genius and I was the mark. But they forgot one thing about church mothers. They always tell you to watch as well as pray. I'd been watching, and now it was time to start praying. Now, y'all, there is a special kind of peace that comes when you realize the people trying to destroy you actually think they've already won. I woke up the morning after that $1,200 steakhouse dinner feeling lighter than a feather. I watched through the window as Marcus and Chloe sat by the pool, sipping smoothies that probably cost $15 a bottle, laughing about whatever empire they thought they were building on my land. Marcus had the audacity to blow me a kiss when I walked out the back door in my office clothes, a plain charcoal gray blazer and those same Ann Taylor trousers that make me look like I've never seen a designer label in my life. "Have a productive day at the spreadsheets, baby," he shouted, his voice dripping with that fake mogul-in-training sweetness. "Don't work too hard. Remember, once that Series A hits, you're retiring early." "I'm sure I will, Marcus," I said, giving him the smallest, most boring smile I could muster. I got into my work car, a silver Honda Accord that I've kept since my junior year as a senior actuary. It's reliable, it's paid off, and most importantly, it makes Marcus feel superior every time he pulls his leased G-Wagon in next to it. He thinks I drive it because I'm scared of luxury. He doesn't realize I drive it because in Atlanta, if you want to see what someone is really up to, you have to be the person nobody notices. I drove toward Midtown, but I didn't pull into my office parking deck. Instead, I made a sharp right and headed toward an unassuming high-security industrial building near the Beltline. It looked like a regular storage facility from the outside, but inside it was a vault for people who have more money than they have ego. I pulled up to the gate, and the $2,000 biometric scanner recognized my face instantly. The heavy steel doors rolled up, and I drove into a climate-controlled sanctuary that smelled like new leather and $400 candles. I parked the Honda and walked over to my private bay. I punched in a code on a keypad that cost $5,000 just to install. The door slid open, and there she was, my $210,000 Porsche 911 Turbo S in shark blue.
Y'all, this car doesn't just drive. It purrs like a cat that just found the cream. I ran my hand over the ceramic-coated finish. I'd bought it 6 months ago as a gift to myself for closing a $10 million risk assessment for a global firm. Marcus has never seen it. Queen Beatrice would have a heart attack if she knew the dusty librarian was driving a car that costs more than her house in the suburbs.
I climbed into the driver's seat, the leather felt like butter, and pulled out my $1,200 MacBook Pro. I wasn't here to go for a joyride. I was here to do some financial janitorial work. I logged into my private wealth portal. I looked at the screen and watched the numbers glow. Liquid assets, $10,452,000.88. That was the money I'd built over 15 years of being the boring one. While Marcus was busy trying to look rich, I was busy actually being wealthy. I'd invested every bonus, every dividend, and every penny of the inheritance Big Mama left me into high-yield offshore accounts and private equity. But now I had to move. I opened the file for the Naya Beatrice Vance Revocable Trust. Since Marcus and Beatrice were planning to drain me slow, I decided it was time to make sure there wasn't a single drop left for them to touch. I spent the next 3 hours moving my liquid assets into an asset protection trust based in the Cook Islands. It's a move that costs $25,000 in legal fees just to set up, but it makes your money virtually invisible to creditors, lawsuits, and, most importantly, greedy husbands trying to file fraudulent deeds. "The math is finally starting to math," I whispered to the empty garage. While I was working, my phone buzzed. It was an alert from my private investigator, Auntie Val. She'd sent me a PDF. I opened it and felt my jaw tighten. Marcus hadn't just been lying about the Series A funding. He had been taking out hard money loans from some very dangerous people in the city, predatory lenders who charge 40% interest. And he hadn't used his own name. He'd used a forged power of attorney with my signature on it to secure a loan for $500,000. The loan was due in 30 days. And the collateral? The Buckhead estate. He didn't just try to steal the land, I realized, my heart thumping against my ribs. He's already sold the house out from under me to pay for Chloe's Chanel bags and his mother's mink coats. Now y'all won't believe what I did next. Most women would have called the police right then and there. Most women would have stormed into the guest house and started throwing Chloe's $900 sneakers into the pool. But I'm a gray rock. I don't react. I calculate. I called my contact at the title insurance company. "Hey, Sarah, it's Naya. I need you to put a cloud on title alert on the Oak Ridge Way property. If anyone tries to file a deed or a lien in the next 48 hours, I want a phone call before the ink is even dry." "You got it, Naya," she said. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," I said, looking at my $210,000 car. "I'm just doing some spring cleaning." I closed my laptop and sat there in the silence of the vault. I thought about the text I'd seen on Beatrice's phone. drain her slow. They thought they were the ones holding the straw, but they didn't realize I'd already emptied the glass. They were sucking on air, and they didn't even know it yet. I got out of the Porsche, locked the bay, and walked back to my silver Honda Accord. I had to go home and play the part of the tired auditor for a few more days. I had to let Marcus think he was a genius for tricking me into signing that deed. As I drove back toward Buckhead, I passed a billboard for a high-end jewelry store. It said, "Invest in what lasts." I smiled. I was investing in the one thing Marcus and Beatrice didn't have: the truth. I pulled into the driveway and saw Marcus standing by the gate, talking to a man in a dark suit who looked like he'd never smiled a day in his life. The man was holding a clipboard and looking at the house like he was measuring it for a coffin. Marcus saw my car and waved the man away quickly, a nervous sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Hey, baby, you're home early," he shouted as I rolled down the window. "Just a light day at the office, Marcus," I said, my voice as smooth as silk. "Who was that?" "Oh, just a guy about the landscaping," he lied, his eyes darting toward the guest house. "You know how I am. I want everything to look perfect for the big reveal." "I bet you do," I said. I drove past him, but y'all won't believe what I saw in my rearview mirror. Marcus didn't go back into the house. He walked straight to the guest house and started yelling at Chloe. He looked scared. And a scared narcissist is a dangerous thing, but a prepared actuary, we're the ones who win the war. He thought he'd successfully sold my life for $500,000. He didn't realize I was about to make that debt the least of his problems.
Now, y'all won't believe where I had to go to get the real tea on my husband's empire. After seeing Marcus sweating bullets in the driveway with that loan shark, that landscaper, I knew I couldn't do the rest of this dance alone. I needed someone who speaks the language of lies even better than Marcus does. I drove my silver Honda Accord, the one Marcus calls my poverty mobile, away from the Buckhead mansion and toward a part of Atlanta where the buildings are made of brick, not glass, and the secrets are buried much deeper. I pulled up to a little hole-in-the-wall diner called the Silver Spoon. It's the kind of place where the floor is a little sticky, the sweet tea is sweet enough to give you a toothache on contact, and the booths are deep enough to hide a three-way conversation from the FBI. Sitting in the back corner was a woman who looked like she was about to head to a deaconess meeting at Ebenezer Baptist. This was Auntie Val. She was wearing a crisp white linen suit that probably cost $850 and a church hat that was tilted at a perfect don't mess with me angle. Val isn't actually my aunt. She's a retired IRS criminal investigator who used to spend her days taking down moguls just like Marcus. We met years ago when I was just starting out as a senior actuary, and she taught me that numbers don't lie, but the people who type them sure do. "Sit down, Naya," Val said, her voice sounding like gravel mixed with honey. She didn't look up from her plate of fried catfish and collard greens. "You look like you've been through it, child. You been staying Gray Rock, or did you let that boy get a rise out of you?" "I'm a statue, Val," I said, sliding into the booth. I set my $1,200 MacBook on the table next to her side of cornbread. But the statue is starting to see some cracks in the foundation. "Well, let's see what the audit says," Val muttered. She pulled a pair of gold-rimmed reading glasses, the kind that cost $600 and probably have X-ray vision, out of her bag. "The $500,000 forgery." I opened the laptop and pulled up the PDF that Auntie Val had sent me earlier. Seeing it on the big screen made my stomach turn. It was a hard money loan agreement from a company called Apex Capital Solutions. It's the kind of place that lends money to people who have been rejected by every real bank in the state of Georgia.
"Look at the signature, Val," I whispered. "That's my name. But I haven't signed a power of attorney for Marcus since we bought the $4,000 refrigerator 3 years ago."
Val squinted at the screen, then pulled a physical folder out of her bag. "I've already run the forensic comparison, baby. This isn't even a good forgery. He used a trace and scan method. See the jitter on the N in Naya? That's the hand of a man who's shaking because he knows he's about to steal $500,000 from his wife."
The financial reality. Loan amount, $500,000. Interest rate, 28%. Compounded monthly.
Default penalty, immediate foreclosure on the collateral.
The collateral, my $3 million estate, and the $5 million of land it sits on.
He's desperate, Nia, Val said, taking a slow sip of her sweet tea. He's been paying Chloe's consultant fees, which is just code for her $5,000 a month credit card bills, and he's been funding his mother's socialite lifestyle. Queen Beatrice has been charging everything from her $400 hair appointments to her $1,200 Sunday dinner catering to a shell company Marcus set up in your name.
A shell company? I felt my blood go cold. I'm an actuary, Val. How did I miss a whole company?
Because he didn't use a bank you use, Val explained. He opened an account at a small credit union in South Carolina using a forged utility bill. He's been funneling small amounts, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, out of your household account for 18 months. It was slow enough that you'd think it was just inflation or a leaky pipe. The flying monkey kickback. Val flipped the page in her folder to a series of wire transfers. Now here is the real kicker. Remember that $50,000 consultant fee he promised Beatrice for the condo project?
Yeah, I said. She was bragging about it at dinner while I paid the $1,200 bill.
It's already been paid, Nia, but not from the condo project. He took $50,000 out of that $500,000 loan he just secured against your house and sent it straight to Beatrice's personal savings account. She didn't just know about the fraud, she's the one who cashed the check. I leaned back against the vinyl booth. I thought about the quilts. I thought about Beatrice telling me to build the throne for my husband. She wasn't trying to help our marriage. She was making sure the throne was padded with my money so she could sit on the armrest.
"Now, y'all won't believe what Auntie Val told me next," I whispered, shaking my head.
"He's planning a technical trap for you, Nia," Val said, her eyes turning sharp. "He knows the loan is due in 30 days. He knows he can't pay it. His plan is to get you to sign one more document, a correction deed, that will retroactively fix that trap signature you used on the quitclaim. Once that's filed, the house is officially his. He defaults on the loan, the house goes into foreclosure, and he's already made a side deal with the lender to buy it back under Chloe's name for a fraction of the cost."
So they get the house, the land, and the $500,000, and I get left with the debt? I asked.
"That's the vision," Val said. "But he forgot one thing. He forgot that you're a daughter of the church and a graduate of an HBCU. We don't just pray, we prepare."
The forensic counterstrike.
Val slid a small silver USB drive across the table. It looked like a regular piece of tech, but I knew it held the digital equivalent of a nuclear bomb.
On this drive, I've got every forged signature, every unauthorized wire transfer, and the recording of Marcus talking to that lender in your driveway. I tucked a long-range mic in your mailbox when I accidentally drove by yesterday. He tells the guy, "Don't worry about the wife. She's a boring actuary. She doesn't even know what color the sky is unless I tell her." I felt a slow, calm smile spread across my face. That's the thing about being the gray rock. People think you're just a rock. They don't realize that if they keep kicking you, they're eventually going to break their foot.
What's the fee for all this, Val? I asked, reaching for my purse. For the forensic audit, the surveillance, and the legal filing fees for the cloud on title? It's $15,000, Val said. But for the satisfaction of seeing Queen Beatrice lose that mink coat, that's on the house. I pulled out a cashier's check I'd already drawn from my private trust. It was for $20,000. Keep the change, Val. I want you to start a toxicology report on Marcus's business accounts. I want to know exactly how much of that $500,000 went to Chloe's logomania obsession. You got it, baby, Val said, standing up and smoothing her linen suit. Now go home, give him one last chance to do the right thing. Not because he will, but because when we're in front of that judge in Chapter 12, I want the record to show that you were the saint and he was the serpent. I walked out of the diner and into the humid Atlanta air. I felt like I had a superpower. I wasn't just Nia, the boring wife anymore. I was Nia, the woman with a $15,000 forensic shield and an auntie who knew where the bodies were buried. I drove back to Bughead, and as I pulled into the driveway, I saw Marcus and Chloe on the balcony of the guest house. They were clinking glasses, probably $200 bottles of Veuve Clicquot, laughing at something on a laptop. He thought he'd won, I whispered, watching them. He thought he could trade my life for a $500,000 lie, but he forgot one small thing. I still have the keys to the truth. I walked into the house, ready to play my part. I was going to give him his one last chance. And y'all, I already knew exactly how he was going to blow it. Now y'all won't believe the vibe in that house when I walked in after my meeting with Auntie Val. You could practically smell the arrogance in the air. It was thicker than the humidity on a Georgia July afternoon. Marcus was sitting out on the terrace of the guest house, lounging on a $3,500 restoration hardware sectional that he'd bought with my emergency funds. He was holding a crystal tumbler of Louis XIII cognac, a bottle that retails for $4,200, and he was laughing. Not just a regular laugh, but that deep, chesty, I just got away with murder chuckle that always makes my skin crawl. Chloe was draped across his lap like a cheap accessory, wearing a silk slip dress that probably cost $800 and a pair of diamond studs that I'm 80% sure were actually mine. I stood at the edge of the patio, still in my boring actuary blazer, looking like the woman he thought I was. The dusty librarian, the enabler, the woman who wouldn't know a $500,000 forgery if it slapped her in the face. "Oh, look, the working girl is home," Marcus shouted, raising his glass. The ice clinked against the crystal, a sound that usually meant someone was about to get gaslit. "How were the spreadsheets today, Nia? Did you find any exciting new decimal points?" Chloe giggled, a sound like glass breaking. "Don't be mean, Marcus. Someone has to do the boring stuff so people like us can actually create things." I didn't let the heat rise to my face. I stayed gray rock. I took a deep breath and walked up the steps toward them. I wasn't there to fight. I was there to offer him a bridge, a way out of the fire he was about to step into. "Marcus, we need to talk. Just us," I said, my voice steady as a heartbeat. He rolled his eyes and sighed, dramatically setting his glass down on a $2,000 marble side table. "Chloe, baby, go inside and check on the marketing deck. The grown-ups need to discuss the budget." Chloe gave me a look that said she thought I was already a ghost. Then she sashayed into the guest house. Marcus leaned back, crossing his legs and showing off his $2,000 Tom Ford loafers. "What is it now, Naya? If this is about the $4,500 catering bill from Sunday, I already told you that was a business expense. You have to spend money to make money." "It's not about the brunch, Marcus,"
I said, sitting in the chair across from him. I didn't lean in. I kept my boundaries tight. I'm going to give you one chance, one last chance to be honest with me, not as a business partner, but as the man I've been married to for 7 years. Marcus scoffed, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Panic? Maybe, but his narcissist brain was already working overtime to bury it. I know things haven't been right, I continued. I know about the hard money loans. I know about the signatures. I know the math isn't mathing, Marcus. If you tell me the truth right now, if you move her out today and we go to a mediator to settle this quietly, I won't call the police. We can settle the debt, sell the house, and walk away. No prison, no public scandal. Just over. For a split second, I saw the mask slip. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to beg for a chance to take me to the movies back at our HBCU. I was holding out a lifeline that cost me $15,000 in legal prep to even offer. I was thinking about Big Mama, who always said that even a dog deserves a chance to get out of the street before the truck hits. But then the arrogance came roaring back. He stood up, towering over me, his face twisting into something ugly. "You think you're in a position to give me a chance?" he barked, his voice loud enough to echo off the infinity pool. "You're a glorified secretary, Naya. You're a boring, aging actuary who spends her life in the shadows of successful men. You should be thanking me. I took your little $3 million estate and I'm turning it into an empire. You're lucky I'm even letting you stay in the main house until the Series A hits." "Marcus, please, think about what you're saying," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "No, you think." He stepped into my personal space, pointing a finger at my chest. "You think you're smart because you know how to count. I'm the one who knows how to move. I'm the one who's out here with the movers and the shakers. You're just the bank. And once I file the correction deed tomorrow, I won't even need your permission to breathe in this house." He reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It looked official. It looked legal. It was the document Auntie Val had warned me about, the trap designed to fix my identity theft signature and hand him the land for good. "Since you're in such a giving mood," he sneered, sliding the paper onto the table next to his cognac. "Sign this. It's just a correction for that scribble you did on Monday. The bank said it was unreadable. Sign it now, or I swear to God, Naya, I'll have your bags on the curb by Sunday dinner." I looked at the paper. I looked at the man I'd shared a bed with for nearly a decade. He was standing there in a $4,000 robe trying to steal the ground I stood on, and he was doing it with a smile. "You're sure about this, Marcus?" I asked. "This is the path you want to take?" "Sign the paper, Nia. Don't be a martyr. It doesn't suit you," he said, turning his back to me to pour another $200 worth of cognac into his glass. I didn't pick up the pen. I didn't sign the paper. I just stood up, my heels clicking against the stone patio like a countdown. "I offered you a bridge, Marcus," I said quietly, "but I guess you're more interested in the view from the cliff."
"Go back to your spreadsheets, Nia," he yelled over his shoulder, "and tell that auntie of yours to stay away from the mailbox. I saw her car yesterday. If I see it again, I'm calling the cops for trespassing." I walked back into the main house and went straight to my office. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled out my phone and checked the status of the legal filing I'd made through my private trust's attorneys 4 hours ago. The screen turned green. Status: quiet title action granted. Temporary restraining order on property transfers active. Now y'all won't believe what happened next. I checked my watch. It was 5:30 in the evening. Marcus thought he'd won.
He thought he'd successfully bullied the boring wife into a corner. He was out there right now, probably telling Chloe that they'd be owning the land by morning. He was probably already spending the next $50,000 in his head. But he forgot one small thing. While he was busy trying to get me to sign a correction deed, the judge had already signed a different set of papers.
"He thinks he's getting the land tomorrow," I whispered to the empty office.
He thought he'd successfully rejected my one last chance. He didn't realize that in 30 minutes, the electricity, the water, and the internet for the guest house were scheduled to be cut off as part of a forensic utility audit I'd initiated. He thought he was the king of the castle, but he forgot that I still had the keys to the main breaker. Now, y'all won't believe how fast a self-proclaimed mogul turns into a crying toddler the second the Wi-Fi goes out and the air conditioning stops humming. After Marcus stood on that terrace and practically spit on the one last chance I offered him, I walked back into my house and didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I went straight to my home office, the one with the $8,000 custom-built mahogany desk, and I opened the control panel for the smart home system. See, Marcus thinks he's the king of the castle because he's got his name on the mailbox, but I'm the one who paid $50,000 for the Platinum Integrated Security and Utility Grid 3 years ago. Everything in this house, from the $3,000 smart toilets to the Sub-Zero refrigerators that cost $15,000, is connected to a centralized server. And that server, it requires a fingerprint that belongs to the person who holds the master account. I looked at my watch. It was exactly 6:01 p.m. I tapped the screen on my $1,200 iPad Pro. With 3 clicks, I initiated what I called the Forensic Utility Audit. In the eyes of the city and the power company, it looked like a routine check for suspicious energy spikes in the auxiliary structures. But in reality, it was the flick of a switch that turned the guest house into a very expensive, very humid box. I sat there in the cool 72-degree air of the main house, sipping on a cup of tea in a porcelain mug that cost $85. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, I watched the guest house. First, the exterior landscape lights, the ones that cost $12,000 to install, flickered and died. Then, the glow from the $4,000 home theater setup in the guest living room vanished. Then came the scream. "Naya! N-I-A!" I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just watched as Marcus came charging across the lawn like a bull in a $2,005 linen suit. He was sweating, his face turning a shade of purple that reminded me of the grapes we used to pick at Sunday dinner back at Big Mama's house. He didn't even knock. He burst through the French doors, looking like he'd just run a marathon in the Georgia sun. "The power's out, the water's off, even the gate won't open," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm in the middle of a $300,000 Zoom call with investors, and the whole guest house just went black. Chloe is stuck in the shower with soap in her eyes because the water pressure died. What is going on?" I looked up from my tea, my face as blank as a fresh sheet of ledger paper. "Oh, Marcus, didn't you get the email? The city is doing a forensic audit of the property's infrastructure. They said something about unauthorized residents causing an overload on the primary grid. Since you filed that quitclaim deed, I guess the system doesn't recognize the guest house as a legal occupancy anymore." "Unauthorized? I'm the owner!" he roared, slamming his hand down on my desk. "Fix it, Naya, right now. Call whoever you need to call and get the power back on. I have a brand to build." "I can't, Marcus. I said, my voice as smooth as a $600 silk scarf. The system is locked for 48 hours while they verify the technical trap logs. Apparently, someone has been trying to bypass the security encryption to access the main house accounts from the guest house Wi-Fi. It's a major security breach. They had to shut it all down for evidence gathering.
Marcus froze. The sweat on his forehead seemed to turn into ice. He knew exactly what evidence gathering meant. He'd been using the guest house internet to log into my private banking portals for weeks, trying to find a way around my two-factor authentication.
Evidence? He whispered, his eyes darting toward the guest house.
That's what they said, I replied. But don't worry, I'm sure a mogul like you has a backup plan. Why don't you use your $500,000 loan to go get a hotel suite at the St. Regis? I hear their $2,000 a night rooms have excellent Wi-Fi. You did this, he hissed, leaning over the desk. You're trying to sabotage me because you're jealous. You're jealous of Chloe, and you're jealous of the empire I'm building without you.
Marcus, I'm an actuary, I said, finally standing up. I was wearing a white silk blouse that cost $900, and I looked like a queen standing in front of a court jester. I don't do jealousy. I do results. And the result right now is that you're trespassing on a property that is currently under a cloud of title legal hold. If I were you, I'd be more worried about the FBI agents who were asking Val about technical wire fraud than I would be about the Wi-Fi.
Marcus didn't have a comeback for that. He just turned and stormed back out toward the guest house, probably to help Chloe get the soap out of her eyes. Now, y'all won't believe what I did the second he left the room. I didn't just shut off the power to be petty. That technical trap I mentioned, it was real. Every time Marcus or Chloe had tried to log in to the Marcus Montgomery Global Holdings portal while the system was in audit mode, it was capturing their keystrokes. It was capturing the fact that Marcus was trying to move $150,000 of that hard money loan into an offshore account in Chloe's name. I pulled up the hidden camera feed in the guest house. They were sitting in the dark using the light from their $1,100 iPhones to look through a pile of stolen jewelry. We have to leave, Marcus. I heard Chloe's voice through the speakers. She sounded panicked. The bank called. They said the $500,000 transfer was flagged for manual review. If we don't get that money moved tonight, we're stuck.
She can't prove anything, Marcus shouted, throwing a $600 crystal glass against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces of financial porn. She's just a boring actuary. She's bluffing. She's not bluffing, Marcus, Chloe yelled back. Look at the gate. There's a black SUV parked across the street. They've been there for 2 hours.
I smiled. The SUV wasn't the FBI. It was just Auntie Val's technical team, making sure no one tried to sneak off with the $300,000 worth of furniture I'd paid for. I leaned back in my chair and pulled up a fresh document on my screen. This was Phase 4, the Red Wedding of Atlanta Real Estate. In 72 hours, Marcus was throwing his mogul launch party at a luxury hotel in Midtown. He'd spent $60,000 on the venue, using my credit card, of course, and he'd invited every major investor, church mother, and socialite in the city. He thought he was going to announce his $5 million development project. He didn't realize that I'd already bought the golden sponsor package for the event, and my product demo wasn't going to be a slideshow about condos. He thought he could lock me out of my own life, I whispered, watching the camera feed as Marcus tried to light a $200 candle with a cheap lighter. He thought he'd set a trap for me by stealing the land. He didn't realize that while he was busy looking at the dirt, I was busy owning the airwaves.
Now, y'all won't believe what I found in the marketing deck he's planning to show at the party, I said to the empty room.
He thought he'd won. He thought he'd left the gray rock in the dark. But he forgot one small thing. I'm the one who knows where all the breakers are hidden, and I was about to turn the spotlight on him in front of the whole world.
Now, y'all won't believe the audacity of a man who's currently $200,000 in the hole throwing a $60,000 party. After I'd spent the last 48 hours letting Marcus and Chloe sit in the dark and humidity of a guest house with no power, Marcus finally resolved the issue by taking out yet another predatory loan to pay off the forensic utility fees I'd engineered. He thought he'd outsmarted me again. He thought he'd cleared the path for his big night, the Marcus Montgomery Global Holdings Launch Gala. The venue was a ballroom in Midtown that cost $15,000 just to rent the floor space for 4 hours. By the time you add in the $25,000 catering package, the $10,000 open bar, and the $5,000 floral arrangements that looked like they belonged at a royal wedding, the bill was sitting at a cool $60,000. And y'all, he'd put every single cent of the deposit on the business development credit card that was still tied to my primary trust account. I didn't stop the charges. I didn't even call the bank. I just sat in my dressing room at the main house and prepared for my own launch. I wasn't wearing my boring actuary loafers tonight. I'd reached into the back of my closet and pulled out a custom Tom Ford velvet suit in a deep midnight emerald that retailed for $5,200. I paired it with a vintage gold necklace Big Mama had left me, the one she'd saved for 50 years, and a pair of black Gianvito Rossi pumps that cost $895. I looked like money. Real money. Not the least G-Wagon kind of money Marcus was chasing, but the I own the zip code kind of money he didn't even know existed. When I arrived at the hotel, the valet line was a sea of luxury. There were 6-figure cars everywhere you looked. I saw Marcus's leased G-Wagon parked right at the front, a spot he'd probably tipped the valet $50 for just to look important. I walked into the ballroom, and the music hit me first. A loud, thumping bass that felt like a headache in the making. The room was packed with the Atlanta elite, HBCU presidents, local politicians, and every church mother who wanted to see if Queen Beatrice's son was really the mogul he claimed to be. Marcus was center stage, holding a microphone and wearing a shimmering silver blazer that probably cost $3,000 and looked like it was made of tinfoil. Chloe was right there beside him, draped in a sheer dress that cost $4,500 and holding a $4,200 Bottega Veneta clutch. She looked like she'd spent the whole day at the spa, probably using the wellness stipend Marcus had stolen from my 401k. Nia, you actually showed up.
I turned to see Queen Beatrice sailing toward me, her mink coat draped over her shoulders like a cape. She was wearing a hat that looked like a satellite dish and a pair of $2,000 David Yurman earrings. "You look different, Nia," she said, her eyes scanning my Tom Ford suit with a mix of confusion and jealousy. "That's a very expensive-looking outfit for someone who's so worried about the math. Did Marcus finally give you an allowance?" "I decided to invest in myself for once, Beatrice," I said, my voice as calm as a Sunday morning. "Where is the VIP section? I want to make sure I have a good view for the big reveal." "Oh, honey, the VIP section is for the partners," Beatrice said, patting my cheek with a hand covered in $3,000 worth of gold rings. "Why don't you find a nice seat in the back with the other wives? Marcus needs to focus on the investors tonight. He doesn't need your spreadsheet energy bringing down the vibe."
I didn't argue. I just smiled. You're right, Beatrice. The back is a great place to see everything clearly. I walked toward the tech booth at the rear of the room. The young man running the visuals was wearing a headset and looking stressed. I'd met him earlier today when I'd arrived as the golden sponsor for the event. See, Marcus thought the golden sponsor was a local real estate firm. He didn't realize that I'd set up a shell company called Vance Legacy Holdings 3 months ago. I'd paid the $25,000 sponsorship fee specifically so I could have final approval over the digital presentation deck.
Is the new file ready? I whispered to the tech.
Yes, ma'am, he said, not looking up. The Vance Legacy video is queued up right after Mr. Montgomery's opening speech. Are you sure you want to swap the luxury condo slideshow for this?
I'm positive, I said. It's all about transparency in business, right?
I walked to my seat just as the lights dimmed. Marcus stepped into the spotlight, the crowd cheering as if he'd just discovered the cure for the common cold.
Ladies and gentlemen, moguls and visionaries, Marcus shouted into the mic, tonight is about more than just real estate. It's about a legacy. It's about the Montgomery Empire. For years, I've been building in silence, waiting for the right moment to show you what a man with vision can do when he's not held back by small-minded thinking.
He looked directly at me in the back of the room, a smirk on his face. Some people play it safe. Some people count pennies. But tonight, we're counting millions. I'm proud to announce my $5 million luxury development in the heart of Buckhead, on the very land that has been in my family's stewardship for generations. The crowd roared. Chloe was beaming, blowing kisses to the investors. Queen Beatrice was wiping away a fake tear with a silk handkerchief.
And now, Marcus said, gesturing to the massive 20-foot LED screen behind him, I want to show you the blueprint for the future, the Montgomery Manor condos. Hit the lights. The room went black. The screen flickered to life. But instead of the 3D renderings of luxury condos, a giant image of a bank statement appeared. It wasn't just any bank statement. It was a blown-up, high-definition scan of the Marcus Montgomery Global Holdings account. The balance at the bottom was highlighted in a bright neon red, negative $204,000. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the $15,000 carpet.
What is this? Marcus stammered, turning around to look at the screen. That's a glitch. Tech team, fix the slide.
But the slide didn't change. It flipped to the next one. A side-by-side comparison of my real signature and the trace and scan forgery he'd used on the $500,000 loan. Above it, in big, bold letters, it said, Forensic Audit in Progress.
Now, y'all won't believe what happened next, I whispered to the person sitting next to me, who happened to be a very confused city councilman.
The screen flipped again. This time, it was the recording from the guest house. The audio boomed through the $50,000 sound system.
She's just a boring actuary. She doesn't even know what color the sky is unless I tell her. Once I file the deed, we're taking the $500,000 and skipping town before she even notices the house is in foreclosure.
Marcus's voice echoed through the ballroom, sounding like a ghost at his own funeral.
Chloe's face turned a shade of white that made her $4,000 dress look tan. Queen Beatrice stood up, her David Yurman earrings shaking as she looked around the room in horror.
Marcus dropped the microphone. The sound of it hitting the stage was like a gunshot.
"Nia!" he screamed, his eyes finding me in the back. "What did you do? You've ruined everything! You've embarrassed me in front of the whole city!" I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't scream. I just walked down the center aisle, my John Vito Rossi heels clicking with the precision of a ticking clock. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I walked right up onto the stage, took the spare microphone from the stand, and looked Marcus dead in the eye. "I didn't ruin your empire, Marcus," I said, my voice amplified so every investor in the room could hear it. "You can't ruin something that never existed. You built a house of cards on my land, using my name with my money. I'm just here to tell the neighbors that the man of the house is actually just a squatter." I turned to the audience, many of whom were already pulling out their phones to record the red wedding of the season. "My name is Naya Beatrice Vance," I said, "and as the golden sponsor of this evening, I have one final announcement. The Montgomery Manor project is officially canceled due to a lack of integrity. But don't worry about the party. The $60,000 bill has already been paid by the insurance company that covers my identity theft." I looked at Marcus one last time. He looked like a man who just realized the cliff he'd been standing on was made of sand. "You thought I was the gray rock, Marcus," I whispered, not into the mic, but just for him. "But you forgot one thing about rocks. If you build your house on one, it stands. If you try to push one over, it crushes you." Now, y'all won't believe who was waiting for Marcus in the lobby, I said, turning my back on him and walking off the stage. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully launched his lie into the stratosphere. He didn't realize that the higher you fly on a stolen wing, the harder you hit the ground.
Now, y'all won't believe the silence that fell over that $60,000 ballroom. It wasn't just a regular quiet. It was the kind of silence you only get in a courtroom right before the foreman reads out, "Guilty." Marcus stood there on that stage, his $3,000 tinfoil blazer reflecting the neon red of his negative bank balance, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a $210,000 Porsche. The air in the room, which usually smelled like $500 cologne and ambition, suddenly felt heavy with the scent of a sinking ship. Chloe was frozen next to him, her $4,200 Bottega Veneta clutch shaking so hard you could hear the gold chain rattling against her $4,500 sheer dress. "Naya, stop this!" Marcus finally found his voice, though it sounded an octave higher than usual. He tried to lunge for the laptop at the tech station, but the security team I'd hired, 2 men built like brick walls in $400 suits, stepped into his path. "This is private company data. It's proprietary. You're committing a crime by showing this." I didn't back down. I stood at the base of the stage, looking up at him with the same calm I use when I'm explaining a life expectancy table to a grieving family. I'm a gray rock, y'all. I don't catch fire. I just sit there until the fire burns itself out. "It isn't proprietary, Marcus," I said, my voice carrying through the $50,000 sound system like a bell. "It's public record, or at least it's about to be. Since you used my name to secure that $500,000 loan from Apex Capital Solutions, I figured the investors you're pitching to tonight deserve to see exactly where their money is going." I nodded to the tech booth. "Show them the consultation slide." The screen flickered. The bank statement vanished, replaced by a high-resolution spreadsheet. It was the toxicology of Marcus's business accounts that Auntie Val had helped me put together. The mogul expenses. Luxury car leases arrears, $42,000. Chloe's branding stipend, $65,000. Queen Beatrice's interior design kickback, $50,000. Personal shopping, Tom Ford, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, $112,000.
The gasps from the church mothers in the front row were louder than the bass had been 5 minutes ago. I saw Sister Mary, who's been the head of the usher board since before I was born, pull her $700 hat lower over her eyes as if she was trying to hide from the shame of being in the same room as such filth.
"Is that my $500 for the building fund?" one man shouted from the back. "Marcus, you told me that was going into a tax-advantaged escrow account." Marcus was sweating through his silver blazer now. "It's a strategy. It's about optics. You have to look successful to attract the $8 million Series A."
You don't attract success by stealing from your wife's 401k, Marcus, I said. And you certainly don't do it by forging her name on a quitclaim deed for a house you don't even pay the taxes on.
That was the signal. The screen changed one last time. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a video. It was the high-definition footage from the hidden camera I'd tucked into the guest house. The room watched as Marcus and Chloe sat on that $3,500 sectional, laughing. "She's so boring, Marcus." Chloe's voice rang out, crystal clear. "I don't know how you stayed with that dusty librarian for 7 years. I would have lost my mind." "I stayed for the credit score, baby," Marcus's voice replied on the screen. He was pouring a glass of that $4,200 cognac. "She's an actuary. She's built a fortress of cash, and I'm the only one with the siege engines to break it down. Once the deed is filed tomorrow, we skip town. Let her audit her way out of a foreclosure." Y'all, the kitchen table gossip in that room turned into a full-blown roar. Queen Beatrice was trying to push her way toward the exit, her mink coat flapping behind her like a bat's wings. She looked like she'd aged 20 years in 20 minutes. "Naya, baby, listen to me," Marcus said, stepping to the edge of the stage, his hands outstretched like a preacher at an altar call. "We can fix this. This was just... It was a role play. We were brainstorming for a screenplay. I was trying to see how a villain would think." The audacity was truly staggering. He was still trying to gaslight me in a room full of people who had just watched him admit to the crime on a 20-foot LED screen. "The math isn't mathing, Marcus," I said. I pulled a thick folder out of my Bottega bag, the real one, which I'd paid $8,000 for with my own salary. "The police have been in the lobby for 10 minutes, and the man you thought was your angel investor in the third row? That's Special Agent Miller from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I invited him as my personal guest." A tall man in a gray suit stood up and pulled a badge from his pocket. Marcus's knees literally buckled. He grabbed the microphone stand to keep from falling, but the stand wasn't meant to hold the weight of a man whose lies had finally collapsed. He crashed onto the stage floor, his tinfoil blazer crinkling as he went down. "Marcus Montgomery, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny," the agent said, walking toward the stage. Chloe didn't even look at Marcus. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just turned and tried to run toward the service entrance. But y'all won't believe who is standing there. Auntie Val was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a new church suit that probably cost $1,500, and holding a pair of handcuffs she'd borrowed from her old colleagues. "Where you going, Miss Logomania?" Val asked, her voice as smooth as sandpaper. "You forgot your Bottega bag, and since the money you used to buy it belongs to my niece's trust fund, I'm going to have to ask you to hand it over, along with those diamond studs." Now, y'all, I just stood there. I didn't feel happy, I didn't feel sad. I just felt balanced. For the first time in 7 years, the columns in my life finally added up to 0. "You ruined me," Marcus screamed as the handcuffs clicked shut over his $2,000 Tom Ford sleeves.
I had a vision. I was going to be the king of Atlanta. You were never a king, Marcus, I said, walking closer so only he could hear me. You were just a squatter on a $3 million estate who forgot that the ground belongs to the woman who pays the taxes. I turned back to the room. The crowd was still in shock, half of them filming, the other half whispering about which HBCU I'd graduated from to be this cold-blooded.
The bar is still open for another 30 minutes, I announced, and since Marcus already paid the $10,000 deposit with my money, I suggest you all have a drink on the Vance legacy. Just make sure you toast to the truth.
I walked out of that ballroom without looking back. I walked past the valet, past the leased G-Wagon, and straight to my shark blue Porsche. He thought he'd used a projector to show the world his future. He didn't realize that I was the one who had written the script, and I'd made sure his final scene was a public red wedding that would be the talk of the city for the next decade. Now, y'all won't believe what I found in the guest house when I went back to pack up the rest of Chloe's things, I whispered as I started the engine. He thought he'd successfully moved his mistress into my house. He forgot that I own the light, I own the power, and y'all, I definitely own the ground he was currently sitting on while the police read him his rights. Now, y'all won't believe the sheer, unadulterated audacity of a man who's already been fingerprinted once in 24 hours. You'd think after getting hauled off a stage in front of half the city of Atlanta, Marcus would have found a nice, quiet hole to crawl into. But a narcissist doesn't know how to play the background. He thinks the world is a movie, and he's the only one with a speaking part. I was sitting on my front porch in a rocking chair that cost $950, sipping a glass of iced tea that was almost as cold as my heart. I wasn't wearing my Tom Ford suit anymore. I was back in a simple white linen dress from a boutique in Savannah that cost $420, looking like the boring wife he'd spent 7 years trying to elevate. I had my $1,200 MacBook Pro on my lap, but I wasn't looking at spreadsheets. I was watching the front gate through the security feed. The sun was just starting to set over the 3 acres of prime Buckhead land that my grandfather bought for $50,000 back in the day, and that was now worth over $5 million. Then I heard it, the aggressive, familiar roar of that leased Mercedes G-Wagon. It pulled up to the gate and the driver started laying on the horn like they owned the zip code. I didn't press the button to open it. I just sat there and watched the screen. Marcus stepped out of the car. He'd clearly posted bail using the last of the emergency cash he'd hidden in a shoebox under the guest house bed. About $10,000 he'd skimmed from our joint grocery account over the last year. He looked like a mess. His silver blazer was wrinkled, his $300 silk tie was loosened, and he was sweating through his $1,200 shirt. "Naya, open this gate!" he screamed toward the intercom. "I know you're in there. I have a right to my property. My lawyers are already filing a suit for defamation of character. You're going to pay for what you did at that gala." I didn't answer. I just picked up my phone and sent a one-word text to the sheriff's deputy who was parked 2 blocks away. Now, I stood up and walked down the steps, my sandals clicking against the $300,000 custom-laid slate walkway. By the time I reached the gate, Marcus was trying to climb over the side fence. He looked ridiculous, his $2,000 Tom Ford loafers slipping on the wet ivy. "Marcus, stop," I said, my voice as level as a horizon line. "You're embarrassing yourself. Again." "Embarrassing myself?" He dropped back down to the pavement, his face turning a shade of purple that made him look like he was about to have a stroke. You set me up. You faked those records. You used your actuary magic to make it look like I stole money when I was just moving assets for the brand. And then you have the nerve to lock me out of my own house?
It isn't your house, Marcus, I said. I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a formal trespass warning. I filed it 3 hours ago. You've been served digitally, but I figured you'd want a hard copy for your vision board. You can't trespass me from my own primary residence, he shouted, his spit hitting the bars of the gate. My name is on the mailbox. I pay the bills. I'm the man of this house. You're the squatter of this house, I corrected him. The land belongs to the Vance Legacy Trust. Always has. The house is a permanent improvement on that land. Since you haven't paid the property taxes in 18 months, totaling $85,422.10, the trust exercised its right to reclaim the structure. You aren't a resident. You're a guest who overstayed his welcome. Just then, Chloe's voice drifted over from the guest house. She'd been hiding inside the whole time. She came running out toward the fence, clutching her $4,200 Bottega Veneta bag like it was a life raft. She was still wearing the sheer dress from the night before, and y'all, she looked like she'd been through a blender.
Marcus, the gate won't open. I can't get my car out, she shrieked. And the Wi-Fi is still off. I can't even call a $300 Uber Black.
Don't worry, Chloe, I said, looking past Marcus at her. The sheriff is on his way to give you a free ride. But before you go, I'm going to need you to open that bag. This is a Bottega, she snapped, pulling it tighter to her chest. It's mine. Marcus bought it for me. With my money, I reminded her. And since Marcus stole that money, that bag is technically evidence in a grand larceny case. But I'm more interested in what's inside it. See, I did a quick inventory of my dining room this afternoon. I'm missing a set of sterling silver flatware that's been in my family since Big Mama was a girl. It's worth about $12,500. Marcus turned to Chloe, his eyes wide. Chloe, tell me you didn't. But Chloe didn't have to say a word. Right at that moment, 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled into the driveway with their lights flashing, casting blue and red shadows across the $5 million property. The deputies stepped out, looking at Marcus like he was a piece of gum on the bottom of his boot. Mr. Montgomery, the deputy said, his hand resting on his belt. We've had a report of a domestic trespass and suspected theft. You were told not to return to this address. This is my wife, Marcus shouted, pointing at me. She's gaslighting all of you. She's a narcissist. She's trying to steal my business. Sir, the property records say otherwise, the deputy replied. He looked at Chloe. Ma'am, step away from the gate. We're going to need to search that vehicle and those bags before you leave. Chloe tried to run back toward the guest house, but she tripped on her $1,100 Chanel slides. As she hit the grass, the Bottega bag flew open, and y'all, I shouldn't have laughed, but the sound was like music. Clatter, clatter, clink. Out tumbled my Big Mama's sterling silver spoons, forks, and knives, glittering in the police lights. Along with them were 3 of my $400 silk scarves and a stack of $100 bills Marcus had clearly pulled from the safe before the gala. The deputy didn't even hesitate. He walked over and pulled Chloe up, clicking a pair of handcuffs onto her wrists. Marcus stood there, frozen, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the silver on the ground, then at the police, then at me. Nia, please, he whispered, the fake baller mask finally shattering into a million pieces. Think about our 7 years. Think about the Sunday dinners at your mother's house. I was just trying to make you proud. I wanted us to be the power couple of the city. You were never trying to make me proud, Marcus, I said, my voice cold and final.
You were trying to make me small so you could feel big. You were the enabler for your own destruction, and Chloe was just the flying monkey you brought along for the ride." The deputy turned to Marcus. "Turn around, sir. You're being charged with trespassing, violation of a restraining order, and we'll be adding grand larceny to that list once we finish this inventory."
As they led Marcus toward the cruiser, he kept looking back at the house, at the $12,000 chandeliers glowing in the windows and the $3 million structure he'd tried to steal. He looked like a man who had finally realized the math wasn't ever going to math in his favor.
"Wait!" Chloe screamed as she was being tucked into the back of the other car. "The bag! Don't let the bag touch the dirt! It's $4,000! The deputy just slammed the door. I stood at the gate and watched the taillights fade away down the street. The quiet returned to Buckhead, that deep, expensive silence I'd missed for so long. I looked down at the silver scattered in the grass. I'd have to have it professionally cleaned, a service that would probably cost me $600, but it was back where it belonged. I walked back up to the house, feeling the weight of the 7 years of gaslighting falling off my shoulders. I reached the front door and paused. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully moved his mistress into my guest house and tricked me into signing away my life. But he forgot one small thing. I'm an actuary. I calculate the cost of everything. And the cost of trying to steal my land? It was everything he ever had. I went inside and locked the door. I didn't head for my office. I went to the kitchen and pulled out a bottle of Chateau Margaux, the real kind, which costs $1,500 a bottle. I poured a glass and sat at the table. "Now, y'all won't believe what I saw in the local news headline the next morning," I whispered to the empty, quiet house. The mogul was in a cell, the mistress was in a jumpsuit, and I was finally home. But I wasn't done yet. I still had to decide what to do with the guest house. And I had a feeling the bulker I'd called about the demolition was going to be the best $200,000 I ever spent.
Now, y'all won't believe how much better the air smells when you've finally taken out the trash. After the sirens faded into the distance and the sheriff's cruisers took Marcus and Chloe away in handcuffs, the silence that settled over my 3 acres in Buckhead was worth more than the $3 million house sitting on it. I didn't waste any time. The very next morning, I was up at 6 o'clock, sipping a cup of Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, which costs $65 a bag, and watching from my porch as a massive yellow Caterpillar excavator crawled up my driveway. I'd paid a demolition crew $15,000 to show up on less than 24 hours' notice. "Is this the structure, ma'am?" the foreman asked, pointing toward the guest house. He was looking at the $12,000 custom stonework and the $500 crystal light fixtures Marcus had installed with my stolen money. "That's it," I said, my voice as steady as a Sunday morning. "I want it leveled. Every brick, every piece of fake gold trim, and every square inch of that $12,000 marble floor. I want it turned into dust and hauled away by noon." "It's a beautiful building," he muttered, scratching his head. "It's a monument to gaslighting," I replied, "and I don't keep monuments like that on my land." As the wrecking ball swung for the first time, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I didn't even know I was carrying. I'd spent 7 years building a throne for a man who was busy digging a tunnel under it. Watching the roof of that guest house cave in felt like watching the end of a long, expensive fever dream. By 10 o'clock, my phone started buzzing with notifications from Auntie Val. She was at the courthouse, giving me the play-by-play of the total destruction happening in the legal system. The sentencing breakdown. 7 years in a federal facility for wire fraud and identity theft. The judge didn't take kindly to him forging an actuary's signature. 2 years for grand larceny and trespassing. Apparently, having $12,500 worth of stolen silver in your bag makes it hard to claim you're just a brand consultant. While she didn't get jail time, the $50,000 kickback she took was seized by the court. She's currently living in a studio apartment that costs $850 a month, and the church mothers have officially stripped her of her socialite status. She went from mink coats to polyester blends in 48 hours.
Now, y'all won't believe the letter I got in the mail that afternoon, I whispered to the empty air as the excavator roared in the background.
It was a letter from the county jail. Marcus had used his one phone call to have his court-appointed lawyer send me a handwritten note. Even from a cell, he was still trying to play the fake baller role.
Nia, baby, this is all a misunderstanding. If you tell the DA you gave me permission to sign those papers, I can be out by the weekend. Think about our legacy. Think about the $5 million condo project. We can still save it. I'll even move Chloe out of the state. Just give me one more chance to show you what a king looks like.
I didn't even finish reading it. I walked over to the $3,000 outdoor fire pit I just had installed and dropped the letter into the flames. I watched the paper turn into gray ash, right along with the Montgomery Empire.
He's still trying to sell me a dream while he's wearing a $5 jumpsuit, I muttered.
I checked my bank account one last time. Between the insurance payout for the identity theft, which totaled $180,000, and the cloud on title being lifted, my net worth had actually increased since the arrest. Being a gray rock isn't just about being boring, it's about being an immovable object. Marcus tried to be the storm, but he forgot that the storm always breaks against the rock. I looked out at the spot where the guest house used to be. It was just a flat patch of red Georgia clay now. I'd already hired a landscape architect for $20,000 to turn that space into a private meditation garden. No logomania, no fake gold, and absolutely no narcissists allowed.
The math is finally finished, I said to myself.
I walked back into my main house, passing the spot where Marcus used to keep his $2,000 briefcase. I'd replaced that whole area with a Miru hand-carved mahogany console table that cost $6,400. I placed Big Mama's cleaned silver, all $12,500 of it, right on top, where it belonged. I sat down at my desk and opened a new file. I wasn't auditing Marcus anymore. I was looking at my own future. Now, y'all won't believe what I found when I checked the final deed records for the Buckhead estate, I whispered, a slow, real smile finally reaching my eyes. He thought he'd successfully stolen my land. He thought he'd left me with nothing but a broke narrative and a broken heart. But he forgot that a woman who knows her worth doesn't need a king to build a kingdom. He thought he was the one holding the cards, but he didn't realize that I'd already bought the whole deck, the table, and the building we were playing in. Now, y'all won't believe how blue the water is when you aren't looking at it through the tears of a gaslighted wife. I'm currently sitting on the private deck of an overwater villa at the Ritz-Carlton in the Maldives. This little slice of heaven costs $5,700 per night, and y'all, I booked it for 2 weeks straight using the dividends from an investment Marcus didn't even know I had. I'm wearing a silk Chanel cover-up that retailed for $2,300 and a pair of Tom Ford sunglasses that cost $550. Looking out at the Indian Ocean, I can't help but think about how much quieter my life is now that the sound of a wrecking ball has replaced the sound of Marcus's lies. After I watched that guest house get turned into red clay and splinters in the last chapter, I didn't stick around to see the grass grow back. I had my $3 million estate listed for a private sale within 48 hours. A tech CEO bought it for $5,200,000, cash. I don't miss the house. A house is just wood and stone. I miss the peace. And y'all, I finally found it.
My phone buzzed on the $200 teak side table next to my $85 tropical cocktail. It was a notification from the Vance Legacy legal portal. Marcus had tried to file for an indigent status for his appeal, claiming he had zero assets to his name. The judge denied it in less than 10 minutes because I'd provided the court with the records of the $150,000 he'd tried to hide in Chloe's name. That money? The court seized it to pay back the hard money lenders he'd defrauded. Marcus is currently sitting in a cell that's probably the size of my walk-in closet, wearing a jumpsuit that didn't cost a penny. He's gone from sipping $4,200 cognac to drinking lukewarm water out of a plastic cup.
Now y'all won't believe what Auntie Val told me about Queen Beatrice, I whispered to the salty breeze.
Apparently, Beatrice tried to walk into her old hair salon in Buckhead last week, the one where she used to spend $400 every Saturday. When her card declined for a simple $50 wash and set, she caused such a scene that the manager had to ask her to leave. The flying monkey has officially lost her wings, and she's spending her Sunday dinners eating $5 rotisserie chicken in that studio apartment.
I took a sip of my drink and leaned back. You know, back when I was a student at my HBCU, a professor told me that the most powerful person in any room is the one who doesn't need to prove they're there. I didn't get it then. I was too busy trying to be the good wife and the supportive partner. I thought that by being the gray rock, I was just being boring.
But here's the secret, y'all. Being a gray rock isn't about being small. It's about being so solid that when the fake ballers of the world come crashing into you with their fake gold and their forged deeds, they're the ones who shatter.
I watched the sunset, the sky turning a shade of orange that reminded me of the Hermes boxes Chloe used to hoard. Only this was real. This wasn't a brand strategy or a Series A dream. This was the result of a woman who knew her math, kept her receipts, and stayed 3 steps ahead while everyone else was playing checkers. The financial porn of my life used to be about what Marcus was spending. Now it's about what I'm keeping. My private trust, $10,452,000. My new estate in Savannah, $4,100,000, paid in full. My peace of mind, incalculable. He thought he could move his mistress into my backyard and I'd just sit there and audit the decline of my own dignity. He thought that because I didn't wear logomania and I didn't brag at the dinner table, I was easy to drain. He mistook my silence for ignorance and my patience for permission. But he forgot the most important rule of the game. You can't build a kingdom on land you don't own, with money you didn't earn, using a name you don't respect. I stood up and walked to the edge of the deck. I looked down at the water, clear and deep. I'm Naya Beatrice Vance. I'm a senior actuary, a daughter of the church, and a woman who finally realized that her one last chance was actually for herself, not for him. He thought he'd won when he moved that girl into the guest house. He forgot one small thing. I still have the keys to the safe, and I own the ground he stands on.
So I have to ask y'all, would you have stayed as long as I did to get the evidence, or would you have walked away on day one? And if you found out your partner was a fake baller using your credit score to fund a mistress, what would be your red wedding move? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're ready to stop being the scapegoat and start being the CEO of your own life. Because the math always adds up in the end, honey. You just have to be the one holding the pen.